Joining me now is Robert Spencer of jihadwatch.org, jihadwatch.org. Robert, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Brandon, good to see you as always.
Let's turn to the kids on the college campuses. I mean, they're all in an uproar. They stormed into the Trump Tower the other day, and of course that was very confusing to people. Jewish Marxist Jews, and that is so. I say I'm more Jewish than a lot of these Jews, and a lot of my Jewish friends tell me that because I care more about the Jewish people and the Jewish state and what's happening. But it's so confusing to the average American when you start saying, "Well, those were Jews defending the Palestinians." And at some point, it gets where it's so confusing to Americans they can't keep the sides because they're used to dividing lines, right? You got this group, that group. Wait a minute, now we got Marxist Jews defending Hamas. It gets so confusing. I've warned that some Americans will just tune out because they're like, I can't understand it all. It doesn't make sense. But that's part of the objective, is it not, Robert? So people are so confused that they can't keep up and they just ignore it all.
Well, you're absolutely right, Brandon. And remember, of course, these people are ethnically Jews, but really leftism is their primary value in life. And so they want to see Israel destroyed because they are leftists, and leftists are collectivists. And the Jews are historically the people who would never assimilate into the larger community, no matter what the larger community was. They wanted to maintain their own identity. The left hates that. There are leftist Jews, but I would respectfully suggest they haven't thought this through. And the fact is that when we see these leftist Jews, it's leftism that animates them, that is the center of their worldview and their values, and that's why they hate Israel. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's confusing to ordinary people who thought, wait a minute, I thought this was about Jews versus Palestinians, and now here are the Jews on the other side. Well, they're turncoats in every community, of course.
Here's a headline at Jihad Watch. Dems rally for Columbia University jihadists whose group endorsed Hamas and murder of Jews. What do you think is going to happen to this young man?
Well, I don't know, Brandon, but I certainly hope he gets deported. He should be deported. He deserves to be deported. The visa rules are quite clear. You cannot engage in open support for a terror group. He was quite clear in his support for Hamas. The nowadays his defenders are trying to claim, well, he never actually mentioned Hamas and all that. That's all just special pleading. It was very clear where he stood. He engaged in violent incitement. He ought to be deported. On the other hand, he's got well over 100 lawyers. He's become a cause celeb for the left. So this is a real showdown for the Trump administration. Are they going to be able to deport these America-hating leftists and jihadis, or are they going to be forced to keep them here? And whichever side wins, that's going to make a major difference over the next 4 years.
Indeed. Let's talk about I guess it's a Toronto police Muslim liaison. Let's look at what he had to say about October 7th. Here we go.
It's funny you say this because, through social media, a lot of people after October 7th started learning about Islam.
They did, yeah.
And they said, okay, what is it with the religion that why is it so hated? Yeah. You know what I mean? Why are they being attacked all the time? So people say, you know what, let me learn about Islam. And there have been a lot of reverts through this whole process. I couldn't imagine, I guess when you're on social media, most of the feeds come through you. Once you see one, it just keeps coming. But the amount of people that are reverting to Islam is unbelievable, and they're just I guess through education, right? They're actually educating themselves and saying, what is it that Muslims are being targeted, and why are they being targeted? Let me learn about this religion. What are these accusations that they're saying about Islam, and let me learn about it myself and figure out, hey, is it actually true or not?
Yeah, because the Muslims are so being attacked on October 7th. It was horrible. The Jews went in there and killed 1,200 Muslims. I mean, that's how that dingbat acted, right? He acted like the roles were reversed. After October 7th, people want to know why the Muslims are being attacked. This guy is either stupid or he's a liar, or maybe he's both. I mean, but to think that these people are how your police or representation of part of your police in Canada. No wonder people are increasingly afraid of the police. You got so many of them are dingbats. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel because of DEI and because they forced the good people out. And so now they're hiring Islamic trash to be cops.
Well, yeah, Brandon, this is the big problem, and it's a big problem all over the West that the Western authorities, the non-Muslims, all assume, oh, Islam is a religion of peace. It's completely benign, completely positive, and so we need to encourage the Muslim presence in the West and bring in Muslims at all levels of society, make them police officers, make them whatever else. And so you get these Muslim police officers like these two guys, and they are openly in favor of this massacre that Hamas carried out against the Israelis. They're playing the same old game. This is a very old tactic, Brandon. I remember, actually, we see it every year now after 9/11. The media, if you look around, do some searches around 9/11 every year, and you'll see that it has become essentially taken for granted in the mainstream media that essentially Muslims attacked the United States on September 11th, 2001, and the Muslims were the biggest victims. The whole narrative about 9/11 today has been shifted. It's all about how Muslims were the victims of horrible Islamophobia after 9/11. Nothing about terrorism, nothing about the ongoing jihad threat. And so these guys are just playing the same game. When Muslims killed 1,200 Israelis, Muslims are the victims. Mm-hmm. And yet we have to understand, as you pointed out, it's very important. These guys, as police officers, are not going to be interested in protecting the wider community. Imagine if you're a Jewish person and you're attacked in Toronto and you call the police and those two guys show up. Whose side are they going to be on? What kind of help are you going to be able to count on? And this is a massive problem that the West is creating for itself and refusing to face.
Or how about if your family is swatted, as seems to be a growing trend, and even this week has been all over social media. My friend Joe Pags, I was just texting with Joe Pags the other day. Joe Pags was swatted, in the wee hours of the morning in a rural area of Texas. And thankfully he knew what to do and got on the phone with 911 and said, hey, I'm a national talk show host, and I think I'm being swatted, and yes, we're outside your house, and they talked it through. But imagine if this was a group of Islamic trash that showed up wearing police uniforms when you've been swatted. How do we know they're not in on it?
That's an excellent question. And there's no real answer. The problem is that the Quran says Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. Those who follow him are ruthless to unbelievers, merciful to one another. Now imagine if you think God said that and you're a police officer in a local city and there comes to be a dispute between, say, a Muslim and a non-Muslim, or somebody who the Quran says are the worst enemies of the Muslims, that is the Jews. Whose side are you going to be on? You got to be ruthless to the unbelievers. This is what the Quran tells you to do. And so the idea of to protect and to serve the entire community, it doesn't even exist in the Islamic context. And nobody is talking about that.
Let's talk about what's happening in the Middle East, in Syria. We've talked about it quite a bit this week. The Alawite Muslims. My friend Sharam, who is a former Muslim from Iran, now Christian pastor, said, these are not really Muslims. They don't want to follow aspects of the Quran and the Prophet. He said, my dad was a beer-drinking, pork-eating Muslim. He liked to call himself a Muslim, but he didn't want to live under Sharia. So he gets our family out of Iran 6 weeks before the fall of the Shah. Okay, there's people that are born that way. They refer to themselves just as people call themselves Catholics but never go, or Baptists, never go to church. The Alawites, they really aren't interested in practicing jihad. And these people, you have an article on your website this week, that the Alawites know that their enemy is not Israel. Speak to this, please.
Yeah, the Alawites, it's a very strange sect that's kind of an offshoot of Shiite Islam. But most of the Muslims, especially the Sunnis, do not regard them as Orthodox Muslims at all. And even a lot of the Shiites don't either. And so they're under suspicion. And of course, that kind of suspicion can bring a death penalty in Islam. They have been hostile to Israel for years. Bashar Assad and his father, Hafiz Assad, they were Alawites. They were hostile to Israel. And so now a lot of the Alawites, with their backs against the wall and the Sunni jihadis coming for them and killing thousands of Alawites, they're thinking, the Israelis, for all the hate that we've directed toward them over the years, they would not be treating us this way. And the Druze have appealed to appealed to Israel for help. A lot of the Alawites have done so as well now. And it's kind of ironic in light of the Assad regime's 50-year-long record of hostility toward Israel.
Let's go to this one. Syria. Human rights groups say jihadists are telling Christians, you're next. This is obviously, we have a lot of Christians in Syria that have already been killed. But on a global scale, in America, what trends are you seeing?
Well, as the Muslim population grows in the United States, and here again, nobody's on this. Nobody's paying any attention. Nobody cares. You're going to have the same thing we've seen in Europe with all Muslim areas or predominantly Muslim areas enforcing Sharia, not respecting the law of the land, making non-Muslims feel threatened when they're there. And those places are going to grow, and the non-Muslim areas are going to contract until ultimately there are conflicts between the Muslim and the non-Muslim areas, as we see throughout history. There has never been a society where non-Muslims and Muslims have lived together in peace. The Muslims always commit acts of violence against the non-Muslims. Why did we think that we're going to be any different in America?
And didn't we just see somewhere in New Jersey, the capital of Palestine declared in New Jersey? Robert?
Yeah, it's an honorary thing. I don't know if you can hear me. I see that I'm visually frozen, but anyway, if you can hear me, we're good.
Yep, I can hear you.
A town in Jersey, city in Jersey, honoring the Palestinians by making a sister city arrangement. It's kind of ridiculous, or even stronger than that. It's kind of ridiculous, but it just goes to the prevailing ignorance about the nature and magnitude of Islamic Jihad that we see all over the United States, all over the place. And in New Jersey especially, a lot of people don't realize when they think about Muslims in the United States, they usually think about Dearborn, Michigan, and the Detroit area in general. But New Jersey has a massive Muslim population, and that is growing. And there are Muslims in positions of very high influence in Jersey. So it's not surprising that it would happen there.
And then, of course, we got Yasser Qadi in Texas, who was down the street from us at a mosque down the street, literally. He's now in Texas building a 402-acre Sharia compound. And apparently the governor of Texas has said that's not going to fly there. But then again, this is the same governor that allowed Colony Ridge, which was a massive neighborhood of illegal immigrants building houses not in code, and it took a helicopter to fly over. Michael Yon and Todd Bensman, who are regularly guests here, both have been guests this week. They got in a helicopter and to fly over it. That's how big it was. And the governor of Texas let that happen right under his nose. Not to mention all these compounds that were built for so-called refugees in Texas that we have pictures of from drones. So I'm not so sure I think the governor of Texas is going to do much about Yasser Qadi's compound other than blow some smoke about it on social media. What say you?
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. I share your skepticism, Brandon. But I'll tell you, if this place is built and populated by Muslims, you're going to start seeing disputes between the locals in the area and the Muslim community. You're going to start seeing those disputes turn violent. You're going to start seeing riots. You're going to start seeing demands made upon the local authorities and the state for special accommodation for the Muslims. This script has played out everywhere in the world that Muslims have gone. And so it's not going to be any different in Texas.
As we get ready to wrap, tell me your thoughts on Erdogan of Turkey, where we're going, his role in the Middle East, his growing role as he, I guess, seeks to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. What do you see on the horizon when it comes to Turkey?
Well, I think Turkey ought to be expelled from NATO and not regarded any longer as a U.S. ally. But unfortunately, nobody's talking about that either, even though he has, as you said, he's made it quite clear he wants to be the Ottoman Caliph. He wants to restore the Ottoman Empire. What's happening in Syria right now is a Turkish takeover. And the jihadis in Syria who are massacring the Alawites and the Christians are Turkish-funded, and they are Turkish clients. And it is all part of Erdogan's aspirations to gain control over Syria as a whole, as well as over other countries that were once part of the Ottoman Empire. As a matter of fact, Ahmed Davutoglu, the former prime minister of Turkey, recently made it very clear. He said, look, Turkey once ruled Gaza as part of the Ottoman Empire. And that means even today, the Gazans are Turkish citizens, and that is Turkish territory. And it's clear that they got designs not just on Syria, but on Israel, Gaza, the whole area, because the Ottoman Empire once ruled it.
And Europe. I mean, we're just watching Europe fall. The things that you can't say in Europe anymore. I mean, this most of the conversations you and I have would get us arrested. Your website, Jihad Watch, would certainly get you arrested in Europe, would it not?
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. As a matter of fact, it's blocked. It's very hard to get it in Britain and in significant areas of Europe now, because the authorities are there. Of course, they're authoritarians. They hate the freedom of speech. They're pro-jihad. So they just don't want this news getting to their people.
So look at this one. Canada drops federal Islamophobia guide that deemed it racist to criticize anti-Israel activists. So if you criticize Israel, you're fine, but don't criticize real Islam.
Yeah, if you say that the Palestinian nationality was invented in the 1960s as a weapon to strike at Israel, then under this guide, you would be subject to criminal proceedings in Canada. I'm happy to report, you might have noticed that story was from Wednesday, and even just since then, the Canadian government got such a backlash about this guide that they've already dropped it. So that's good for now, but I'm sure they'll be trying again later.
Okay, so what some of the leaders in Europe have said, Americans, you're not out of our reach. You post stuff online we don't like, we could come for you. And I think it was, maybe it was the Jay Sekulow at the American Center for Law and Justice warning about Americans, you better check before you go overseas. Because you go to the UK, you touch down over there, and you've posted stuff on social media they don't like, they might arrest you. So you might want to be careful going over there. But they've said you're not out of our reach. This week, we watched the former president of the Philippines, and I'm not here to defend anything he's ever done, but he was very hard on the sex traffickers, very hard on drug trafficking. And now they've gone to the Philippines, Manila, and arrested him and flown him back to The Hague. And I'm looking at the judges on the website of the International Criminal Court, like Romania, a judge from Romania, which canceled an election recently when one of the candidates was rising as a national populist candidate, and they didn't apparently want him to win, so they just canceled the election. Later on, they went on to arrest him for a while and then let him go. Really? So we want a judge from Romania sitting, or Uganda, which is notorious for communism and punishing Christians and killing them. I mean, I don't want these clowns in these robes sitting in judgment of what we do in America, and that's why Trump is pulled out of the International Criminal Court and put sanctions against some of their people. And they've targeted, of course, him, Benjamin Netanyahu, and others. But, you know, whatever this former president of the Philippines did, if he did anything wrong, he should be a grand jury indicted and put on trial in the Philippines and judged by a jury of his peers, his own people. They didn't want to do that. I see a dangerous precedent. And while we're talking about what you and I post online being called out by people in the UK and officials that they want to arrest us, you know, that they may come get us, or be careful, we're going to come for you. Well, we jump to national leaders, okay, international leaders. I'm concerned, because what stops them from putting out an indictment against Robert Spencer, and your local state or local authorities allow, you know, Interpol and these guys to come in there with the ICC and arrest you and take you back to The Hague? I'm concerned we're headed toward this kind of global system. Are you worried at all about this? Do you think I'm onto something?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it, Brandon. That's where the Biden regime was headed. That's what we would have had if Kamala Harris had become president. And now Trump has directly challenged this international, allegedly legal apparatus, particularly by challenging the ICC's arrest warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu. And if he can prevail, Trump that is, against the ICC, then that will be a tremendous victory for individual freedom around the world. But if the ICC prevails, then yeah, that is in our future. that American citizens exercising the freedom of speech will be arrested on American soil by foreign agents in service of these international powers.
And when that happens, a lot of Americans will go, wait a minute, how did this happen? How did we get here? Well, why didn't I know about this? If I'd only known, right? That's always the thing. Well, if I'd only known, right?
Absolutely. That's
And we'll be going, hey, we were just, Robert Spencer and I and a few others have been telling you for decades this was coming.
Exactly.
Folks, if you want to educate folks about this so that we have more people that are aware so we can push back against it, jihadwatch.org, very historically accurate website, current news and information and analysis and commentary, and then the great books by Robert Spencer, Anti-Semitism, History and Myth, The Critical Quran. He has so many books. You'll find them there on his website. Just go and check it out, jihadwatch.org, jihadwatch.org, and you can also follow him on social media. Robert, thank you for your insight, your education, your information, and your bravery.
Thanks, Brandon. It's always great to talk to you.
You too, my friend. Robert Spencer checking in, folks. Jihadwatch.org. Hope you'll check it out. Jihadwatch.org.